So you get the motor sounds on the road. It's always fun when the motorcycles go by too. So I just usually wait until I see the sign that somebody has got on. All right, I got the little eyeball. So, all right. So here we are. Stories at Sundown from Willard Public Library. I'm Michael McCullough, and we're broadcasting live from Burley Corners in northern Penfield Township. And with my guest with me this evening is my boss, Cathy Lucas, colleague, boss. Yes, Cathy Lucas, the director of Willard Library. Cathy, stepped into the breach. We had another guest. Those of you who follow us on Facebook might have seen that we had Jill Hine, but she had a family emergency. And so we scrambled, and we're nimble like we always are at Willard Library. We adjust and adapt. Jill's going to be with us next week. And thank you, Cathy, for coming on, because they would have been so bored if it had been me all by myself. I might have sang another John Prine song or something just to spice it up.
You're very entertaining, and they would have enjoyed it. But thank you for your invitation.
So it's great to have you on.
Thank you.
And just a reminder to our audience, you can always make a comment and say hi or ask a question. Cathy and we're going to talk a little bit about the library. Go figure. But a lot of times when we have folks on this show, we just talk a little bit about how you're navigating these times, and these are crazy times. And a lot of us look back on our new job, whether it's a boss or just a new job anywhere, and think about when the honeymoon was over. Well, yours was over not quite 3 months in, because you took over as director in January, and by the end of March, we were, I can't remember the precise date that we shut down, but
March 18.
March 18, yes. And so that was quite a trial by fire, and we're still being tried, are we not?
We are indeed.
Yeah. So how you and I talk all the time, but we'll pretend that I'm just learning this. How are you doing? And
I am just so grateful for an incredible staff, an incredible administrative team, and an amazing and supportive board. I mean, really, everyone has come together and stepped up to the plate with a attention to the fine line between safety and access. And we continue to struggle with that. We know that some of the individuals that need our services most have the most challenges, and that while we're providing Library Express, we're constantly looking for creative ideas and ways to provide more than we are, and to do it safely. But I'm also really grateful for the comments we've gotten from the public.
Yeah.
Who have been very supportive and understanding, and have expressed their support and appreciation during this trying time. So it has required just what you talked about earlier, which is being nimble and flexible, and that's across the board. And people have really done an exceptional job with that. So.
Yeah, they really have. My colleagues and I, and we were just talking about anniversaries, and I'm coming up on the 4th year of my time. I started it part-time right after the 2016 election.
Right.
And I guess I didn't screw up, because you hired me full-time when the position came around. But, one of the things that I have always, from day one, working at the library is just the heart of service that people have, the heart for service that people have. Because it is books, of course, and that's what everybody thinks about. And we have an amazing collection. How large is our collection, Cathy? Can you rattle that off?
I can't rattle it off the top of my head, but it is really, it's well over 750,000 items, and we pride ourselves on ensuring that the collection is current, that it addresses needs of the community, and that it is broad in terms of speaking to all aspects of an issue.
Yeah.
And so we've been, even the percentage of our budget that we spend on materials that benefit the public is much larger than other libraries as a percentage of the budget, and that's something we've always prided ourselves about.
Yeah, I remember when I first started, we visited a library in another part of the state, and we were comparing them because they were similar size, similar populations, similar staff size. Um, and our budget for our collection was significantly higher. It was kind of like a flipped priority. And I've always heard, even long before I worked for the library, that it's such a gem for the city the size of Battle Creek. I think our population now is 56,000, maybe something like that, to have a library this large. But as I often do, I go off on tangents when I bring up a subject. Just the heart of service at the library. The eye openers for me when I started was working on, we call it the information desk, although old schoolers call it reference desk, and I guess I'm an old schooler because I call it that myself a lot too. But people come to that desk for some oftentimes really heavy problems and challenges, and and all of my colleagues, I learned from them. They really go the extra mile to find those answers, to find the pathway to yes, even when it's difficult.
Yes.
And it's just been a lot of fun, and although sometimes there are heavy moments, but it's really fulfilling and gratifying. And you and I both came from different career paths.
We did.
And I landed at the library. I thought I'd be a newspaper man for the rest of my life. It's all I ever wanted to do. And came to the library, and I found a lot of the same things that I really loved about working at a small city, a community daily newspaper. I could find that at the library, and that was really cool. So what drew you to the library? I know that you were working in the nonprofit alliance, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
You had offices there, but somehow you caught the bug for the library. So tell us about that.
Well, this is a very special place, and the culture is very special. And I can't imagine a group of colleagues that I would rather work with. And so back in 1995, I had been at Safe Place, and then moved to the library, who provided an umbrella for the Nonprofit Alliance, which provided management assistance help for local nonprofit organizations. About 11 years in, just as the library was growing, as Nonprofit Alliance was growing, it was time for the Nonprofit Alliance to change umbrella organizations because of the size of its growth. And I really valued what I found at Willard, the culture here, the service here, and much of my background, my first master's degree is actually in social work. And so I found that very helpful in terms of providing answers and finding ways to serve people here at the library as well. And there was just as you found, I also found there's a lot of overlap between the professions we were in and what we're able to do at the library.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing is that basically we exist to help people achieve their goals.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
and it's as simple as it can be as simple as applying for a job, or getting an advanced degree, or all kinds of stuff. And but then there's also the storytelling aspect of it. And actually one of the biggest learning curves for me is not learning curve, but the time put into what I love about this is the advice you give for people when they're looking for something to read, right? That takes it takes time to build up that knowledge, and to really have an idea of what's coming and what's going and what's hot and what's not and stuff like that. So
yes.
And you've got to go back a long way, I think, and you probably know this better than I do, but I don't think it's been a long time since a Battle Creek native has been the director of Willard Library. Is that not true?
I think that is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
And not taking away anything from past directors. I mean, we've had some good ones, and we've had some that have been there for a long time. And I'm not a native. I mean, I've been here for 20 years, though. I feel like a native, but I'm not.
Yeah.
But do you think that helps you in your position? I mean, does that knowledge and that experience kind of inform your leadership of the library?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I value at the library is having different perspectives so that we can look collectively at various issues. So while I think it's something that has helped me in being connected with the community. I've grown up here since I was 2 years old, and was a graduate of Battle Creek Central. But I feel a strong connection to the community, and I'm really this position has been such an honor to have been selected to serve the community in that way. But I agree with you. It lends a different sense of connection for me.
Yeah, yeah. So what's been the biggest surprise to you about being at the library or being a director at the library or anything?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest surprise was COVID. It was not what I anticipated. I don't think anybody anticipated it, but trying to find ways to continue to provide services in creative ways during the shutdown, and how staff really came together in terms of finding new ways, different ways to still provide services to the community. And so it was both a surprise, and it's also, while there have been many challenges, there have been many heartwarming moments as well. And
Sure.
so.
Yeah, it has been a surprise. And we got that beautiful comment from Cynthia
Okay.
today about, remember you, Christina had shared it.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, and maybe she often watches. If she is watching, chime in, Cynthia. But yeah, the development of programming like this, I think, has been a real boon. In fact, I don't think we'll ever quit doing it now that we've done it. Although I am so eager to have in-person programming.
I am too.
I mean, that's just such a staple of what we are and what we want to be. We want to be a place where people come together, and it's so hard in this time right now that we take away all the incentives for people to physically be together. And that's I can't wait to get past that.
Well, libraries have always been about bringing community together, and so this has been, a very different time. I'm really grateful that we're able to open the library for on-site visits right now, even though we can't provide the full length of but the regular hours. But it's been great to see everybody back, and everybody's talked about how safe they feel based on the precautions we've taken.
Yeah, I get a lot of comments about people just being happy that we're open. I mean, I still get the comments from people who are annoyed that we make them wear masks, and I've been called a moron. Have a nice day.
Well, and we always try to be friendly and kind and professional, but I think it's the way of the world right now. Everywhere you go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like wearing the masks either, but
I don't either.
but I don't want to get sick. But a lot of people they just come in and they just really appreciate that, and actually a lot of people are appreciative because they wouldn't come in if we didn't have these safeguards in place.
Absolutely, and actually, I think probably about 95% of them are really 95 to 99% are really happy that we have the masking in place.
Yeah. So we haven't had any questions come on. We've had some pretty good views over here, but nobody's asking any questions.
Sure.
Putting all the pressure on me.
Oh, so we talk books?
Yeah, let's talk books.
Okay.
We both just happened to finish books that we really, really liked. So that's nice. Why don't you go ahead and go first?
Sure. I just finished a book called A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. And I was really excited about the book and the story. It's one that we're considering for Battle Creek Reads. And part of the reason that it really struck me and that it became quickly one of my favorite books was because how closely it aligned with my grandmother's story. And My grandmother grew up in Greece. She saw her mother murdered at the age of 7. There was a civil war during the time, and she thought her stepfather sent her to the U.S. at age 16 because she thought it was for better education. And 3 days later, she married my grandfather, who was 20 years older, and they didn't speak the same language. And they ended up having a happy marriage. In this particular book, that's not the case. So I just want to read one short excerpt from the book, and then I'll tell you a little bit about it.
Sure.
But it says, I write for those women who do not speak, for those who do have a voice, for those who do not have a voice, because they were so terrified, because we are taught to respect fear more than ourselves. We've been taught that silence would save us, but it won't. And it was a really powerful book. It was a universal tale about family and the ways silence and shame can destroy what we've sworn to protect. And so Isra lives in Palestine, and at 17, consistent with cultural norms, she's married off by her parents to an American and sent to live in Brooklyn. And she's forced to live in the crowded home of her in-laws, where there are 3 other children in addition to her spouse. And she finds herself on the edge, on the receiving end of near daily beatings and verbal abuse. And the conditions worsen as she has 4 girls, and she's made to feel as a failure because she hasn't been able to, or she's not given birth to any sons, and the blame is laid at her door for that.
Yeah.
And so things change dramatically after she and her husband are killed, and the grandparents are left to raise their granddaughter, Isra's daughter. And Isra's contacted by an estranged family member with some jarring truths about her family's history, where she's been misled. And she helps her understand and gives her the tools to take charge of her own life rather than allowing her grandparents to marry her off. So it's a really powerful story, and it was gripping throughout.
Yeah, it sounds gripping.
Yeah.
And Battle Creek Reads, we always assume that most people know what it is, but that's well, why don't you talk about it?
Sure, and chime in. So Battle Creek Reads is what's often called in other communities community read, and it's we select a book, we ask and announce it, and make copies available for checkout to the public, so that everybody can read the same book in a given time period. And then we invite the author to come to the community. And in this case, it will probably be a virtual visit once the author is selected.
Yeah.
And the author talks about either the book or the experience, and then community members ask questions. We also provide discussion questions, so that if book clubs are reading the book together, that there are some guides there as well. But this is going on, close to 20 years, maybe a little longer at this point. So it's it's a program that the community has embraced.
Yeah. I was a part of it when I was the editor of the paper. I was actually part of some of the early selector groups that we used to have. Yeah. So yeah, it's really cool, and it's really popular, and we start getting questions about what's the book, in January or February.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really great. It sounds amazing. And we're reviewing, I think, 5 titles, right now.
We're up to 8, and this is one of them. And actually, this book is available on Hoopla, and it's also available on, at either Overdrive or Hoopla, and also available in hard copy here at the library.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So the book that I wanted to share, and actually, so Jill and I, Jill Hine, who will be here next week, she should have her own hold shelf at the library. She's always got like 10 or 12 books, and so she couldn't decide what to read, and so we were just going to talk about the love of reading. And I chose a book from one of my newly discovered favorite authors, and I'll stick it up on the screen in case people want to write it down. But Andrew Krivak this book, The Sojourn, was probably is one of his most noteworthy titles. We don't have it in our collection, but we will. I'm ordering it. So hopefully, we'll create some demand for it. We have other books by him in the library, and actually, a few weeks ago, I talked about one called The Bear. But this book, which was a National Book Award finalist, I love, and you can tell it's a very thin volume. His writing is just so spare and resonant. And I guess maybe it's the journalist in me. I like I like economy with words. But this book tells the story of this boy. I'm sorry, this man. He was born in the United States. His father, who was Slovak, moved to the United States to find his fortune, like so many did in the early part of the 20th century, and he to mine for gold or mine for silver, I should say. But in the mining camp, his wife, who was not feeling well, took Joseph, who is the main character of the book, and a sister-in-law's son out for a walk, and they were crossing a railroad trestle, and a train was coming. Okay, and she ends up, and the boy that was walking with her, his foot gets stuck, and so she won't leave him. So she lets her baby slip out and into off the trestle into the water to save him, and she's killed. And so this baby is saved, Joseph is saved, and his father and him go back to the old country, where he is to become where his father takes up sheep herding. But it's really a story. It winds through his life, but he ends up fighting in World War I as a sniper, and this story is about the immense hardship of that time, but his relationship with his father, how when he left his father, he had decided that his father had become weak, and through this process, of course, he rethinks his relationship with his father. But along the way, he carries with him the experience of his life, and then getting through the war, the experiences of having killed so many people, and that sounds like a very dark story, and it certainly is not easy to read sometimes. But his reflections are so relevant to so many of the challenges that we have today, which you could say about all great literature.
Yes.
And like I told you before, I usually choose 5 or 6 things to read, and I'm lucky to get to one of them. There's a couple that I would love to get to, but I'm going to read just a little bit and set it up. And did you read the passage you wanted to read?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where, let's see if I can. Yeah, I just this is where he is in a firefight with his brother Zli, who's not really his brother. It's someone that his father has adopted at the request of an old friend, and promised to raise as his own. And they are raised together in the mountains, and then they go off to war together. And they are assigned to, as snipers are, to take out machine gun nests and people like that, are the enemy. And so there's just a few paragraphs here that I think are great examples of the kind of writing he does. Actually, I'll read a couple of pages since we have time. And so it began with little more warning than suspicious activity, as Lee and I and a few spotters reported to our command. At first light on the 12th of May, we had just come off a week's rest and were sitting in a good hide forward of our main trench, from which we had seen an artillery team in range. We wondered why they had exposed themselves so foolishly, but we never thought to question our luck. The officer was easy to identify, as his gunners loaded and aimed their cannon. I reckoned him at 550 yards, a long shot. But Zli never second-guessed himself or me. Windage was right light and the morning air dry, and sleep just brushed the trigger, and I watched that man's head snap back and body crumple as though it had been relieved of its bones. And hell followed. 3,000 guns, long range, medium range, trench mortars, everything. Opened fire on us and every other Austrian position from Plava to the Adriatic for 2 days straight, so that no one or no thing could run, move, or even breathe. A hell in which I prayed to God that I might die, so that the banishment toward it would end as quickly as it had begun. They say that the earth is a soldier's mother when the shells begin to fall. And she is, at first, your instinct not to run, but to dig and hold and hug as much of that earth as you possibly can. Down, down, down into the dirt, with your fingertips, hands, arms, chest, thighs, and feet, until you're like a child clinging with its entire body to comfort after a nightmare. But minutes of this, then hours and days, and you wonder, how many days? Because the earth herself cannot stop shaking and disintegrating as the shrieks and howls rain like otherworldly miscreations on wing, who know where you're hiding, and want not just to kill but annihilate you. They're hissing in infuriate ruts as they approach the last sound you'll ever hear.
Wow.
He paints just an incredibly poignant, amazing picture of that experience. And what you learn about Yosef through this is how he carries those experiences with him through the end of the war. And he's eventually imprisoned as a prisoner of war. And what I and this is where in the book, dark books are good when they leave you with hope,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And in the process, as a prisoner, when he is finally transferred to Sardinia, where they are overseen by people there who also grew up in the mountains and the hills, and seemed to have an empathy for their prisoners and did not mistreat them.
Mm.
And in him, they saw a very deep and wise man, and they ended up pairing him with this old Italian man who was in prison for life, and they developed this incredibly close relationship. That's ephemeral because they spend very little time together, but helps him actually work through the nightmares of seeing all the faces of the people that he killed, and to reconcile within himself the decisions he made as a soldier, without pity, without questioning, but then finding himself um, deciding that he's done with purpose, and so all that purpose that he had when he carried into war, he has no more purpose. And then the story goes on, and a lot of improbable relationships develop, but he saves the life of a Roma girl, 15-year-old girl, Gypsy, who is with child, and helps her, saves her from an attack from two soldiers, and then together helps her get to a place where she can have her baby, and talks about holding on to a life like he had not held on to a life since he held his father. And so it's just an amazing read. And so we got to have it in our collection, Cathy. So we're getting a couple of copies. But this writer, Andrew Krivak, I think it's pronounced. He's from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. So
interesting.
You gotta like anybody, us Pennsylvanians, we stick together.
Your home territory.
That's my home territory. Although Wilkes-Barre is on the other side of the state, but we'll take it. Although there a lot of people call it Wilkes-Barre. So
interesting.
Who knows? But so that's one. And I am going to mention this. I'm not going to read anything because it's not like really artsy read. But for you nonfiction fans, Winners take all. I just finished this, and I was actually participating in a book called at Western Michigan University to discuss this. Um, it's the author's name is Anand Giardardis. That's it. Um, I learn how to pronounce it, and then I forget. But it's really a critique. It starts off with this juxtaposition of the fact that we have so many advances in technology in our contemporary lives, whether it's healthcare or whether it's the internet or whether it's you know automobiles, technology and advances that really help improve the lives of people. And yet at the same time, we have this widening gulf of inequality and a growing segment of our population that has no way of taking advantage of these advances. And this is really a critique of neoliberalism. This idea that market forces are the best way to address what have traditionally been addressed in the public sector.
Mhm.
And so, looking at the trend of people making their millions, much like the Carnegie did it too. I mean, it's been going on for a long time, but it's a really modern phenomenon that, the Bill Gates of the world and, folks like that, who very well intentioned perhaps, but they take their millions and they invest it and they try to affect in that case, public education.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of other, the Clintons are a good example,
Mhm.
as another example, and how it's very difficult because so much power is accumulated by wealth in our country. It's very difficult to challenge that, and especially when their intentions are so noble and good, and say, but it's getting worse.
Yes.
May it not be your fault? And it's a pretty heavy critique of philanthropy, which is also very similar because philanthropy generally comes from people of wealth, companies of wealth. So it's a great book. It's been a bestseller, and I recommend it. Um, and I recommend contrarian viewpoints too. So, as you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and just one of the things I love about the show is talking about the love of reading, and hopefully, people get to learn a little bit about the people in the community to kind of make it go right, which is all of us. And
Right.
so, but also tie it back to work like that can really be inspiring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I loved the story that you are reading right now that you're going to add to the library collection. And I think that's exciting. But I agree with you that dark stories, and that relates to the one that I just read too, dark stories that provide hope at the end.
Yeah.
Because I think, a lot of these are such universal themes that speak to us in different ways.
Yeah. Well, and a story. Both of the stories that we read are based in very real events that people live through and live through today.
Yes.
It's sometimes easier to look back at the way the world was. So World War II. Well, I'm sorry, World War One. There's a comment. Yay! So
Well,
anyway, and I needed to mention that I'm outside tonight. Obviously, that's you're doing, Cathy. I appreciate that because it was so dark and rainy all day, and I didn't think I was going to get to be outside. We have one more week that we're going to stay outside next week. Then the time changes, and it's just too dark.
Yeah.
But we're going to continue with this as long as people keep watching it and people keep wanting to come on. So, and as long as you keep letting me do it,
Oh, hey, we are so grateful to you for doing that. I mean, I think it's just so enjoyable and just such a relaxed atmosphere, and it's unique. It's not something I've seen anywhere else. So thank you for creating the program and for inviting me as a guest.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks for stepping in last minute.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. You have a great weekend, and let's hope we get one more great fall evening out of this, and then we'll adjust for the wintertime. Until next time, have a good night.
Thanks.